All right, hello everybody. This is Politinik Political News Channel. We are live. We are also um, doing a live stream using OBS Classics Studio here. So I think we are online. So welcome everybody. Let me send a link. So we're doing a political live stream. We're talking to a couple of different people here on their political views, different current issues, and different things on the news and what they think is going on. And we'll be doing our show here in a moment. I'm going to do here, and you should be able to see my screen here as well. I'm going to send a link here to some of our people here on Discord. There we go.
Dude,
all right.
I'm switching over to our chat real quick. I'm switching over to our chat.
Okay, sure thing.
Message me on there when you're ready to start the call.
I'm ready now.
Okay. You start the call then.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we're talking right. Well, let me make sure that this is good right now.
Well, I mean, like, if you don't want, what's his name interrupting us, Downskull.
I'm watching.
Well, yeah, he can. Well, I don't know. Do you want Downskull to talk to, or do you just want to do those two?
Well, I figured since Downskull's only 10, I don't figure he'll understand much of what we're talking about, really.
Well,
that might just
he'll
be
learn. He can listen on. So what were we talking about? All right, that guy. Now, that guy in the back. What do you want me to call you? Just that guy in the back, or do you want to call you Richard or Rich or?
Call me Richard if you want.
Richard. Okay. All right, Richard. So, what was it that we were talking about earlier? You were mentioning something about Trump, I believe.
Yeah, I was actually talking about what I've heard on the news recently about Trump, and I had asked you earlier too about your views on Hillary and Trump during the 2016 election.
Okay, so here, I can talk about the election first, if you like. What I think was going on. So, during the election, this is what we saw. We saw, you know, we had the Democratic Party and Republican Party, and what ended up happening, what I've noticed is, you know, Democratic Party, we had mainly two people. We had Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and then we had on the Republican side a bunch of candidates. We had, what's his name? Jeb Bush, I believe, was in there. You know, Trump was in there.
Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump, in my own opinion, were the big three.
They were the big three, and especially in the end, because I'm kind of starting from the very, very beginning. So
I turned my camera on, by the way.
Yeah, I see. And I think, let me see, just our okay, sure, yeah.
I'm not really switching over between the live stream or anything. I'm just staying on the Discord call.
Yeah.
If you want, I could switch over to the live stream.
No, this is fine where you are right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I'm really just trying to censor myself with my camera.
Well, you're good where you're at. So what ended up happening was you had a bunch of candidates on the Republican side, and then you had like two candidates on the Democratic side. And because Trump was decided to run for president, the news and the media covered him the most out of all other candidates. So Trump got the most attention. And
well,
I
believe it wasn't even the fact that it was just running for president. I think it was honestly just the fact that he's a big businessman himself, honestly, with the whole Trump Towers and everything located in New York, too.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm curious is, why did he decide to go and run for president?
You know, I don't even know that myself.
Yeah, because I think there was something happened. I don't know what it is off the top of my head that caused him to want to run for president. And I think because he decided to go run for president, he ended up getting the most media attention. And in terms of getting the media attention, you know, watching his media attention ended up giving to the viewers.
Wait a second, I'll be right back.
Okay, sure thing. Yeah, but they end up giving him a lot of media coverage. And let's see. Speaking of which, let me see what's going on here. All right, so the live stream is going well. I might add Rooster now that I think of it. So yes, so basically what ended up happening was I think because of Trump's coverage by the
Yeah,
media.
it's not. Grab it.
Oh, you're back?
Yeah, sorry, it was just my mom.
Oh, no problem. So I think that influenced a lot of people's votes because I'm wondering what would have happened if he didn't get as much coverage or maybe little to no coverage as he compared to the big coverage that he got during the election. I'm kind of wondering how that would have changed the outcome of the election. Um, but what I find interesting is that um, I don't know if we got a lot of coverage of what the other Republican candidates were, what their views were, because I feel like we did get some of that during the primaries.
Might I just say that the only four candidates I remember ever seeing anything about on TV, on the news myself, were Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, and Marco Rubio or whatever, however you pronounce it.
Yeah, Marco Rubio.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, they also had Jeb Bush. You had,
you had a few others.
yeah, I forgot the guy, Ted Cruz, and a couple of, yeah, you had Ben Carson and a couple other ones.
And wasn't there also some other old lady? I hate to use the
Jill
term
Stein,
old.
yeah, Jill Stein, I think was the other big one, but she was running, I believe, independent.
Didn't she support Hillary just like Bernie did at the end?
Let me see what happened. Well, they all ended up. Everybody who was leaning left decided to go support Hillary in the end because she kind of took over the show. My understanding.
Her and Trump both.
Let's
One
see,
second.
Jill Stein.
Yeet.
There's Jill Stein.
Get a water bottle.
What is her
Right
Green
here.
Party? That's what her um, party is. So that's what is that considered independent? Or is that well? Let's see. Then we have Gary Johnson. Where's Gary Johnson again?
Well, we could all look back on that really. Um,
Yeah.
well, what were we really going to talk about here? Because I know we had two things we wanted to talk about, which was this, my opinion on, Trump and all that, and just what I've heard living in a Republican family. I try and stay non-political when it comes to it.
All
And
right.
then we also were going to talk about the 6-year war, as they call it over in Ukraine.
Yes. Yes. I was gonna tell you about
Yeah,
that too.
people my age and people here in Iowa and United States alone haven't heard much about it, apparently.
Yeah, because we don't actively cover it.
Yeah.
Um, so what were you? Well, first do the Trump thing that you were talking about. You were telling me about you had a different view or something like that.
Well, I didn't have a different view. I was just stating what I've heard and what I think in my own opinion about what I've heard. I've
Oh,
heard really a lot of negative things, but I guess news, uh, some news coverage, some news covering stations have their own like different opinions when it comes to it and what they're gonna show for good and bad for different candidates and about their president and all that. But KWWL for me, which is the main news streaming service I use, basically, I've heard that, or I've seen basically and heard that they've been doing a lot of negative reports about Trump. Like every day of his government shutdown, they've had a total. I do believe. Quote me if I'm wrong, or prove me wrong if you want. But I do believe they had a chart showing how much money was lost, people who worked in the government. And they had a whole ton of stories of different families that weren't going to be able to pay their bills and stuff like that. And now that that's over, and he still doesn't have his the money he wanted because of the government shutdown for his border wall, which in my own opinion isn't very needed because it actually has been shown that without the wall itself, the problems down at the border haven't even been that bad. They've actually gone down in the last 6 years.
Hmm.
And that was an independent study I read an article about on the New York Times, subscribed to on Google and all. But I was also going to talk about how, in my own opinion, out of Hillary and Trump, I felt Hillary was the night or the best of two evils, in my own opinion. Because
Why did you think that she was the better of two evils?
Because I've heard a lot of things, and one of big Trump's big things when he was running for presidency was how he's going to build a wall. And right away, when I first heard that, the first thing that popped into my mind was, oh well, duh, that's going to raise taxes and stuff, and people are going to be outraged by that. And I figured, he's got a lot of things, and he is the only president that hasn't released his tax return, only one. And which raises the alarm with me, honestly, that he might be trying to hide something. Not to mention the Stormy Daniels claims and all that were going on while he was running for president. But I felt like the only negative things I really heard about Hillary were all the negative things that happened when her husband was in office, and about how her also about her alleged email scandals or whatever, using her
Yeah, her own
for
VPN
voting.
server or something like that, or her
Yeah,
home
I'm pretty sure
server.
she was using her. I'm pretty sure she was using her government for personal.
Yeah. So, um, you know, kind of when I look at the news, now I haven't been watching it proactively uh, recently, but what I do know is I don't. Have you heard about the migrant caravan that's coming? That I know at one point was coming. I don't know what it's doing now at this point. So there was a migrant caravan that was supported by, I think, NATO, if I'm not mistaken, going somewhere from South America into the U.S. and it kind of happened all at once.
Yeah,
And
it was like almost like a big wave in like an ocean, somewhat of immigrants coming from Mexico. That's how I interpreted it. I don't know if you interpret it the same way.
well, see, here's what I don't know what to even how to even interpret it, but from what I've read, that this is, and I'm kind of getting this information from Infowars, by the way, but um, from what I've read is that the migrant caravan is more like a political, not an attack, but more like a movement that's purposely done.
Almost
Um,
like a standpoint. Almost like a standpoint.
yeah, a standpoint, I think, and because I mean, there's always been, people trying to get into the U.S., but I feel like this wave was a purposeful one. That I do
Yeah.
think is true. Problem is, I'm not
I'll be
entirely
right
sure
back.
what the purpose is. And let me see while you're doing your thing. Let me find out what Infowars was saying about the caravan, if I can remember. Where is it? West News. Here we go. Migrant caravan. Trying to find the exact information. Trump doing nothing to stop migrant caravan. Oh no, Mexico doing nothing. My bad. Um,
Don't worry, I've heard everything you said. I left my door open when I walked down and up the hall, so I heard everything you were saying.
yeah. So I do sometimes watch Infowars to kind of see what people are thinking or what different viewpoints are saying from main news. Um,
Mm-hmm.
to listen to both sides basically.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I've read from Infowars, is that the migrant caravan is possibly an attack
Okay.
that is funded by different groups for some purpose. Um, oh, here we go. Let's go for this here. Okay, so
I'm
more,
sorry. Right now, I'm trying to get my janky charger cord to work correctly so I can stay on Discord.
yeah,
Because I don't want to have to use my laptop for it, because that's just going to be heck in a handbasket. You keep talking. You keep talking. I'll keep listening.
yeah. So what I'm trying to do is figure out what's going on about these migrants, because from my understanding, it's not like they're not coming from Mexico. They're coming from South America. So that
You mean
basically
like
anywhere,
Brazil?
like so basically the
You
countries
mean
that
like
are considered
Brazil?
to be um, what's it called, dangerous by, and I don't mean dangerous as in they are dangerous. I mean dangerous as in statistics suggest that they're dangerous. Um, and I don't know what they're exactly referring to in this, but um, there's also reports that the caravan is composed of gang members and that Mexico doesn't want them either. Here we go. So immigrants reach border planning human stampede.
Oh yeah, you're on Infowars right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know if you're able to see my screen. I can probably just screen share it for Discord as well.
No, I'm on your stream right now. I'm on your stream.
Yeah, because I'm trying to find the exact article that I'm remembering from. That
Well, if you can't, yeah, you don't have to worry about it. Honestly, I don't want to bore the viewers, considering it's only you, me, and one other person watching.
Yeah, because this is one of those things where we record, and at this point, since I don't have a ton of viewers, they come back later in the future to see the show. So,
I hope you don't mind, but I just shouted out in your chat who else is watching.
oh, no problem. Yeah, because I know I think at least probably Humane is my guess because he's kind of doing a couple of his own things, but yeah,
What's the chat?
apparently there's more than what's going on in the news going on, which is always true. Um, thing is, it's hard to figure out what's going on, and I make a suggestion to look at different political viewpoints. But the thing is that what people don't realize is that there are a lot of news stations or news companies that have their own additional agenda with
Yeah,
what they're saying. Because,
yeah, and that's kind of what I meant when I said each one has their own views politically,
yeah,
and like in a way they each support their own different or one of the two candidates, basically Republican or Democrat. So they're purposely gonna stream bad things about the other side, which is just easy to understand.
yeah. So, um, I mean, with that, it's hard to really determine what's going on in reality.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll tell you what. I can't seem to entirely remember what it was that we're talking about Trump. I'll tell you what I know about the whole Ukraine situation with Ukraine,
The whole war
Russia,
with
Europe, and
it
U.S.
wasn't even a war. It's not even a war with Russia. It's almost a war with supremists, or not even supremacist even, but Russian like not 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 invaders, but you know supporters or something like that. So it's not the official Russian government even. They haven't even gotten involved yet.
Okay, so here is what's going on. So I think this all started when Russia annexed Crimea. I think that's what happened first. Um, and to kind of give you an idea, I'm gonna go to Google Maps to kind of go more in depth here. Um, I might be wrong here, but I think what happened was because there was the Soviet Union, and
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Soviet Union was basically like Soviet, like this modern Russia. There's Soviet Union was basically like from like here basically. If I can, if I
uh-huh.
can, yeah. So um, Russia always has not had a lot of good access into waters. And what I mean,
Actually,
but
Russia, I do believe, is one of the few countries that doesn't actually have any natural resource.
Russia does has natural. They have natural gas, um,
Uh,
which is one
there
of the
might have
biggest
been
things
some
right now,
here in
and
the.
they're supplying Germany with a lot of it. And the big company right now in Russia is Gazprom, um, which is sort of like what I would call Russian government owned, but it's sort of yeah, Russian government owns it. Okay. Um,
The Russian government owns a lot of things over there. They're kind of a controlling government, you know.
yeah, they're somewhat
I
controlling.
actually
They're not completely controlling it right now. There are
in the
people who.
country in the town I live in Iowa, there is a store owner that lives down the block from me who actually used to live in Russia. And his name's Baron, real nice guy, real successful and all that. But he would tell me stories about growing up there and all the government problems he had to deal with and all that. Because he's 62, I do believe. 62, I do believe. But he's told me
Okay.
some pretty interesting stories.
Yeah, and I find that it depends on where in Russia you lived and grew up in, because if he's from Russia, I'm assuming that he is in the actual Russia, not like something that's the border countries. Because I've talked to a lot of people, and I think that there's a lot of different things that were going on back in the day too. But I mean, even right now, there's people who like the system that's in place right now. There's people who want to revert back into communism, and then there's people who want to do something their own third different party or group. So, um, in relation to back to Ukraine, the only real access points that people really had in Russia, which the main, because the thing is, Russia sort of it's well, to kind of, I like to say this because not a lot of people know it. They think Russia is a country. Russia is not just like one major country. It's its own federation,
Yeah,
and you can kind of tell that because you have these provinces, but they call it basically I like to call them republics, but
yeah.
it's not just republics because they have their own like provinces and stuff too. Um, thing is, the way geographically it's set up, the center is like most Russians live on the east side here. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
Western Russian is what I meant. I'm thinking Eastern European. So most live here, and then you have some people here, but I mean, there's not much politically any things that are important here exactly. But the
Yeah.
thing is that Russia always needs access to water, and they have kind of like three main areas. You have the Baltic Sea. Problem is, it's
Hmm.
like governed by EU
Yeah.
mostly because I mean you got Germany basically and Denmark that control this whole area here. Um, Finland is EU. I mean Russia basically owns this part, and also this is considered to be Russia as well, which even I forget too. That you have
Yeah.
technically a piece of Russia here. Um, and then you have the north, which is usually frozen over, and then you have the Black
Yeah.
Sea, which is basically this whole area here to get into the Mediterranean is controlled by Turkey. and this has always historically been a big area that people have been trying to control.
Well,
And
yeah, and you can't really blame them because it's a great waterway.
yeah, and basically Russia kind of, from my understanding, they always sort of had, because the thing is in Ukraine, to me it seems that it's sort of divided because you have a ton of Russians on the east who live in Ukraine, and then you have people
Uh,
who are more Ukraine on the middle and the west, and then especially West Ukraine, they don't even want to be anything. They want to be part of the European Union.
mm-hmm.
So there's a big conflict of interest within the country. Um, and I almost wonder what if does it make sense to split the country up to maybe even like different countries?
In
But
in all honesty, what really sounds like a good idea to me at the current point is you know how Canada's divided up, right, into its provinces.
yes,
I feel like splitting Ukraine up like that might be a good idea. And I'm not saying like put up a straight border wall like the Berlin Wall or anything like
right.
that. Divide them all. But I'm saying if you want to divide and prevent serious rioting and stuff like that, split them up a little,
I mean, literally, if you were to have a political border along this river here,
Yeah.
to me that
Yeah.
makes sense. But I don't see. I don't know the
Honestly,
exact
that would kind of
specifics. I'm
be
kind
rough.
of just guessing here. Um, but anyway, I know that Russia, a lot of Russians were here before they annexed it.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, the only thing that really happened was a political change in Ukraine, and I'm talking more like the Western Ukraine, the European people. Um, they were kind of like, oh, we're losing power, Russia's taking over. Um, and honestly, if Russia really wanted to take over Ukraine, I think they could, but I
Oh
don't think
yeah,
that's,
no, they definitely have the army and the weaponry to do it.
yeah, but it's not in their interest, as far as I know. Um, the thing is, you also had another thing in Russia, which is from this is I'm referring to what I've been told by different people. There are a lot of problems in the way the government is run because there's a lot of corruption going on.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get into a little bit of that earlier.
Yeah,
I've heard
because
there's a lot of very controlling, very corrupt in a way. And I don't know if this is completely 100% true or anything like that, but I've heard in Russia when you go to school, you get a certain like IQ test or whatever, and then the Russian government basically tells you what jobs you can and cannot do. And if you say you wanted to do a job that they say you couldn't have done, well, basically they're going to do their hard-earned best to prevent you from doing that. It sounds almost like a very controlling government in a way too.
hmm. So I don't know if that's true or not. That what you're saying to me sounds a bit more Soviet than modern Russian. Um,
Yeah.
and I can tell you what I know goes on there and what I've heard goes on there. Um,
Okay.
so I'll give you a big idea. Right now, the way Russia's set up, everything's centered around Moscow.
Yeah.
St. Petersburg used to be the capital, so it's basically number
Yeah.
two now, is what I like to call it. And it's kind of like I would almost call it sort of like it's like neck and neck, but it's more like big brother, little brother type of thing.
Yeah.
Because technically, like I would almost consider it to be Moscow Part Two. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
And I mean, just historically, that St. Petersburg used to be the capital of Russia.
And let me just make a nice little joke here, but honestly, it'll probably end up being the capital again if Russia keeps doing what it's doing. Putin and all that.
Well, you know, Putin's from St. Petersburg. He
No, I never
actually,
knew that.
yeah, he was born in St. Petersburg, grew up in St. Petersburg. Um, he also has a residence there as well, and he like a lot of his doctors, from my understanding, and like people he knows and friends there are from St. Petersburg. Um, so basically, they're like the main two cities in Moscow because Moscow actually used to be not as, nowhere as big as it is now, from my understanding, and it's more like towards I think it's like
Honestly, I do believe population-wise, the two are neck and neck. Honestly,
yeah, they're neck and neck. I mean, it's literally it's like as if it's kind
probably
of
the only difference between the two of them is their names and the way the cities are laid out. You know.
yeah. I mean, literally that's what it is. But
And location, of course, but yeah, let's not get into the nitty gritty details.
yeah, and I can tell you location wise, they're geographically they're about the same. It's literally
Yeah.
hardly any difference other than more rivers and lakes versus more forest. Um, so what am I saying? Oh, so that's kind of like what happened with the conflict there. That and then so that's kind of like where it started from, and then it kind of morphed into Ukrainians thinking Russians are going to take over, and I don't even think Russia was intending to do that. I think they were trying to get this area because one, it always was sort of Russian, and two, I think it's a military um, strategic point that they were trying to attain as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Honestly, if if Russia wanted to do a full European conquering like it planned to do in World War II with Hitler and all that, honestly, I can see Ukraine as being a major point to take over, considering it's almost in the center if my internal brain mapping is correct.
well,
So it wouldn't be too bad of an idea, honestly, to take over.
I don't know. See, I don't know if they would want to do that, and I don't know what the Ukrainians' viewpoints are. I don't know if do I know anybody from Ukraine? I know. I tell you what, I know people
I
who
know
are
a guy
from
from
areas around
Ukraine,
it.
but I know a guy from Ukraine, but he doesn't get on Discord very often, so he probably couldn't join us in the call anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind asking him because I'm not somebody who's. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm somebody who is for the improvement of Russia, but I'm not somebody
Mm-hmm.
who thinks that Russia is going to go and try to take over the world. There's a lot of people who
Yeah.
think Russians want to take over the world. They want to spread some kind of like communism everywhere. I don't think that's true.
I honestly feel that's more of a stereotype than it is fact.
Yeah, I do think that's somewhat a stereotype because there's also evidence that suggests that there is um, what I would call what's it, how to put it like
Yeah, now that I'm looking at your stream and I'm looking at the map, Google Maps, honestly, Ukraine is basically the bridge to Poland and Romania, honestly, and then from Poland to Germany and Germany to France and Spain.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I like to do with Europe. I feel like it's not divided into Western and Eastern. I almost would say there's like three or four regions,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even more than that, because you have what I like to call classic, what everyone thinks of Europe, which is like four or five countries. Is basically Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and I mean this is what I call what you know what
United
Europe is.
Kingdom.
And you have UK, United Kingdom, which is people are confused if it's European or not. Depends on who you
Honestly,
ask.
when I first thought of the United Kingdom, I kept thinking Australian for some reason, but
Yeah,
definitely not.
it basically, I think Australia is considered to be, what is it considered to be?
Hello?
It's not part of the UK, but it's like used to be part of the UK, if that makes sense. Like, I think,
Could you repeat that all out? Repeat that all, like, the last 2 minutes of audio have all just gone, like, quiet. I couldn't hear you.
okay, so, um, England has a lot of, like, territories. I think that's the a good word to use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I was relating to is that I think Europe is kind of divided into different areas because you have your classic European areas that almost everyone likes to visit, which is usually France, Spain, Italy, and then Germany, sort of.
Yeah.
Um, so I like to say that you have the European Union too there, but it's sort of a weird system. I like to say it because it works in some ways and doesn't work in others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've been to Spain and Italy, and I know people have been to France, and I've been there like a long, long time ago. And
Yeah.
it's like a lot of this area is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Other than, there's languages and cultural differences, but all of it
Yeah.
seems very similar.
But you're gonna find that just about everywhere, like there.
Yeah. Um,
It's like India. No matter where you go, certain places will have different ways they do things.
yeah. Germany, I feel like is very different from France, Spain, and Italy, just culturally and politically. Even though
Yeah.
politically France and Germany is actually somewhat similar now.
Uh-huh.
Switzerland is doing its own thing. Austria
Yeah.
I think is part of the European Union, if I'm not yeah, probably it is, but they don't use the same, well, they kind of try and do their own thing. So I like to call this Central Europe, this whole area here.
Yeah.
Then you have what I call the mix group, which is somewhat like mix European, mix its own
More like
thing, mix
the
like
mesh group.
Slavic. Um, from my understanding, there's a lot of Polish people who don't like Russians. And I had my
That might
own.
just be. That just might be not a. Actually, more. Yeah, probably more of a racial thing.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're asking. But I
Yeah,
actually had
because
a,
some people like to hold grudges. You know.
yeah, I had somebody who, this is kind of like back in college, one of the first colleges I went to. I had a teacher who was from Poland. Um, and I'm very suspicious that I was, what's it called? Well, treated differently, even though I didn't tell them that I was part Russian. I think they somehow found out and then um, did their thing.
Yeah.
Um, but what's very interesting is that a lot of countries on the Eastern European area show very similar things in their language and culture. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like these countries have their own thing, but they're very similar in Slavic fashion, but culturally and their language is very different. Because it's like you have Russian, well, we'll just say Slavic. That's kind of like what I'm trying to get into, because all this is just about the same here.
Yeah.
Then you have Russia again here. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, they're Slavic in nature, but the language and culture is a little bit different. I would almost say like they're a mix between Slavic and then Scandinavian. Um, what else? Finland is like so, and then you have this area here which is like Scandinavian. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you look to the south, I mean, it's very similar in language. Like Ukrainian Slavic, Bulgaria has is just about Slavic with Serbia, Macedonia and Greece, which is kind of similar in some ways to Russia, because I know religiously Greece is similar to Russia in some ways. What were we
Might
talking?
I just say? Might I just say? I feel like we might just be digressing a little off of the main fact because, in all honesty, it's not even Russia. Like we started off this whole conversation about how Ukraine, or like it wasn't even them going to war or anything. It was just tensions rising and everything
Yeah, I
because
think there's a lot of that going on too.
Ukraine is just honestly is just afraid that Russia's going to invade, and there have been people, quote unquote, people attacking them, quote unquote, or attacking the border, and it's not even Russia; it's supremists or uh, not even supremists, but not loyalists, or but almost like extremely strong in their thinking. That's how I'll quote this.
Yeah,
people that are
there's a lot of
attacking the border.
things going on. Like my uncle who lives in St. Petersburg, he always hears that Ukraine's planning to attack Russia and all that. And there's also evidence around like this whole area here that there's groups that are trying to provoke attacks and or violence or what do you call it,
Yeah.
rises or whatever, um,
hmm
towards Russia. There's a lot of that that's being
I've
suggested.
heard that Ukraine has actually put up the Ukraine government has actually put up a lot of snipers posts and stuff like that on the border. They've a lot of the supremacist groups that I was telling you about have blown up a lot of the bridges and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying to do something. I mean, what needs to be done?
I think they're just honestly trying to heat up the tension.
I think that's true. Because I think they're trying to. Because I think they also are
They're
wanting
war hawks
to
basically. Do you know what a
encourage
war
other
hawk?
people to join them.
Do you know what a war hawk is?
Warhawk. Well,
It was
elaborate
a
what you
term.
mean about that.
It in school we're learning about American history and all that, and when we first became our colonies and all that, there were people called war hawks. That's what we called them, who wanted us to go to war with Great Britain in the South and North to try and take over Canada. But I honestly think that these groups nowadays that are trying to raise tensions, those are basically just war hawks for them.
I think that's correct. Um, because do also think there's groups that, because there's also groups in Ukraine that want to do their own government too.
Yeah,
And because of that, I almost wonder if you should split Ukraine up somewhat, or again, as you mentioned before, have their own province system, which I think they do have something like that. Not exactly a province, but
call me what you will and think what you think for what I'm about to say. But this almost seems like it would be a great Skyrim system. I don't know if you've ever played the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, but I'm very
um,
big into the game recently,
I'm a
and it
little bit
almost seems
familiar
like
with it.
it almost might even be a good form of government for them. Is almost electing like states almost a representative for their country and having like different sections and areas, almost like holds in the game, basically controlling big areas and having their own laws and stuff. That might even be a good one too.
I think they have some of that going on. Um, I'm not sure exactly, but it's hard to really because here's what I've noticed. I don't really know anything of hardly anything about Ukraine. What I do know is that economically Russia had been affected by that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because what happened was Russia used to have an extremely strong economy, especially during the 60s and 70s. This was during like the space race era. They had a
Yeah.
really strong economy to the point where the Soviet ruble, their currency, was stronger than the US dollar. Like
Yeah.
one ruble was like $2 and some change.
Yeah.
And then it started kind of going on a slight decrease, but it wasn't like anything severe. It was like kind of like what's going on with England and the US dollar right now too. Um,
Yeah.
but the collapse of the Soviet Union, has destroyed their economy. But during the 90s, the whole era, apparently a lot of bad things were going on. I don't know what exactly was going on. A lot of gang violence
Probably just
apparently
an increase
happened,
in
and just
crime and stuff.
yeah, like a lot of bad things were going on apparently.
Just a
Um,
lot more basic crime like looting and assault and stuff like that.
yeah. So I mean, that was taken care of, and I know for the longest time it was something like on average it was like $1 was about I think it was about 20 to 30. I know it for longest time was around 30 rubles or so for a dollar. But I mean, they kind of adjusted things. They just basically they did what I like to do with like Mexican currency because I used to work in an area that dealt with like finances. Um, so they kind of made adjustments, but what I noticed was that the ruble dropped from like 30 rubles for a dollar in 2014 and it went up down all the way to like 100 rubles for $1, which is a massive
Wow.
drop. Um, and then the crisis kind of like died down, and their economy um, kind of fixed itself and went up to 50. But
Almost like there was a depression over
yeah,
there
like a
after the war.
depression almost. Um, but what I've noticed right now is I don't think there's a lot of economic activity going on in Russia other than the Gazprom and the natural gas resource that's going on. Um, and I think because of that,
And
the country might be
speaking of
affected.
gas, do you remember hearing about Trump dropping out of the global warming treaty or whatever it was?
I think you're talking about the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah, the Paris Climate Agreement. I honestly don't know what was going on in his head when he decided to do that. But I don't know what you think, but I think that was a very stupid decision on his part because not only did that raise tension between us and our allied countries, but it was also a very bad idea considering the fact that that was set up almost as a fully neutral agreement to try and help the world as it is.
Well, here's what I've heard of surrounding that area. That um, I think there's some groups on the politically right that think that the left is trying to destroy the economy. Which I don't know if that's how true that is. But the thing that they say is that um, the reason he was trying to get out of the Paris Climate Agreement was because he was for some sort of like industry economic thing because he was thinking that, well, I might be wrong, but that's there are groups that are trying to get the Paris Climate Agreement to hinder the economy, and he was trying to get out of it to help the economy.
Uh
It
huh.
wasn't like him trying to make a statement or something, but I think he was trying to fix the economy, which I find evidence that suggests that is somewhat true because from at least around where I live, I've noticed gas prices going down, becoming cheaper. Which I mean, to me, I like that gas prices are going down. But
It
I don't know what it
is.
means as a global economy.
Real quick, I want you to fix your microphone real quick. Because it sounds like you're moving away from it and it's not picking up your voice. Because your voice has just been cutting out slowly.
All right, let me try leaving the call and joining the call. Okay, how
I
about
gotta go in like 14 minutes anyway, so.
yeah, no problem. But yeah, I think it's just well, I'd like to tell you what I know about Russia based on my
Okay,
visit
tell
there
me a
recently.
little.
So it is different from the U.S.
Yeah.
I can't speak for the whole entirety of Russia, but um, just like the U.S., Russia does have a lot of people from other countries,
Mm-hmm.
and people don't really know that. But when I went there, I mean, I did go there during World Cup, so I can't really exactly say accurately. But what I've noticed is that there are a lot of people from neighboring countries or former Soviet countries that are in Russia right now because Russia is doing better than some of the neighboring countries.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is a lot of people from like former Soviet areas. So you got like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia. Not many like Eastern areas, but well, from what I've noticed, and I think it's basically one because we have a gas industry in Russia that's working. Um,
Uh-huh.
but what I don't like is that there's not other like big areas. I mean, you do have an industry like a tourist industry somewhat, but it's very
Uh-huh.
limited. Because I mean, if I go and start asking people, "Hey, do you want to go to Russia?" People are going to be like, "Oh, I don't know. Something bad's going to happen."
Yeah.
Which I mean, I mean, they don't realize. Well, that's the case of any country, really. But
Yeah. Some countries some countries are seen in a worse perspective than others because some countries are put on the spot more than others, like Mexico recently with the whole immigration thing. Like a lot of countries, like over in the Middle East, especially with the whole ISIS thing, a lot of Muslims and everything have been fleeing the country.
Yeah, that is true. And what's funny is I even know people who've been to Arabic countries, and they think
Uh huh.
there's something going on there. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I do think there is a change in power that's spreading around. Um, and I've never been to any Arabic countries, so I don't know, but I know some people who are Arabic. Um, but what I find interesting is they're trying to turn the whole I like to say the whole Arabian Peninsula, but I don't know if this is how accurate that is. They're trying to make it more instead of oil based, they're trying to make it tourist based, which I think
Yeah.
is a good thing. And I do think Russia should try to put more into tourism because they certainly
Mm-hmm.
are able to do it a
Yes,
lot better.
tourism, in my own opinion, is a very good economy.
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's working for countries that are not even that strong. I mean, like I mean,
Like France
honest,
and London, like London alone with the whole Big Ben thing. Everybody knows who Big Ben is. Everybody likes Big Ben, the big old clock tower and everything. I mean, that's one of the places on my bucket list I want to go visit. Hey, that's tourism. That's bringing in London millions of dollars each.
yeah, I mean, just England has its own like atmosphere and culture that people are familiar with and actively want to engage in,
Yeah,
um,
and
which I don't think
Russia's
Russia
got one of those
has.
big things. Got Russia's.
Or you're breaking up a little bit, but what I'm saying is that I think they need to work more on their cultural output because what's going on now is Russia is copying a lot of American things, which is
I got disconnected for a minute there, by the way.
oh yeah. Did you hear what I said about Russia copying US?
No, I didn't hear that.
Okay, so Russia is, from what I've seen, at least like on TV and like a lot of their media stuff, um, except for news things, like their news things, I think is fairly good because you got a lot of Russian news agencies that are controlled by the government, but there are stuff that's like not controlled by the government but observed by the government.
Uh huh.
So, and from what I've seen, is actually not as biased with some news stations as compared to the U.S. Because like in the U.S. it's very left based, and you see very little like conservative news stations.
Yeah.
While Russia, I mean, you have the big government things, but then you have other news stations that seemed more balanced than in the U.S., which is what I
Yeah.
like because you can easily go and see what different people are saying as compared to in the U.S.
Yeah.
Um, So what I was going to say is when I've been to Russia, I went there in 2018. No, 2000. What's the year? When was the last? Crap, my memory's acting off.
Was it 2018 or 2017?
2018 is when I went there when they had the FIFA World Cup.
Okay.
Um, and I went to St. Petersburg and I drove a little bit around, like from St. Petersburg to like near Moscow. Not in Moscow, but like near it. Because there's a little
Okay.
village where we have where my family has something like related to. Um, but basically, my Russian side of the family is from St. Petersburg,
Yeah, you told me
and
that.
um, I like the city, but the thing is, from what I've noticed, I think there's a lot of things that needs to be fixed. For example, um, they have an agriculture industry that I like to say is kind of iffy. It's like they can certainly improve on it, but they haven't been improving on it. They have a lot of
Yeah.
land. I know it's not easy to farm there, but they can make it so it's better to farm there. Like
Yeah.
I don't see anything that's going on in the U.S. Like I don't see a lot of greenhouse, like what's it called, hydroponics, aquaponics systems, like what's it called? Not barns, but like areas where they grow. Because what they should be doing, in my opinion, is especially in areas where it's not really that's like empty, because there's so much like empty land. They could easily fill it up with like agricultural things there and make themselves grow a lot better. And problem with hold on 1 second. They're calling me nonstop now.
Oh, Enic,
Yeah,
Enic, and the other
Anakin.
guys.
Yeah. Oh, here's the
Look,
third
dude,
call. Just
it's
a moment.
almost midnight for me. It's almost midnight for me. So I got school in the morning.
Oh yeah.
So I need to go anyway.
Okay, sure. But yeah, if you want, I'll
Um,
continue this later.
we can do this again Wednesday if you want, Ethan.
Yeah, let's continue it later then.
Okay, man. Have a good night.
Sure. Have a good night. I'll talk to you later. Bye now.
I like the YouTube video already, by the way.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll talk to you later
Bye
then.
bye.
All right. See you later. Bye now. All right. Let's see here.